The next technology that you can choose is the Universal Windows Platform. And once again, let's create a folder for it in our solution so we can go through and test some things on it. And just quickly, the reason why we didn't bother to go through and show the WPF language capabilities is because the WPF is running on .NET 8. Right there, so it means it has all the capabilities of .NET 8, essentially. Close this. Universal Windows Platform applications can be deployed to an Xbox like everything else, but they can actually be activated on the Xbox. They've had a pretty consistent history starting as Windows 8 Metro applications and then transitioning as the operating system changed over time. The main problem with this technology is that it's bound to the operating system, something that was touted as a feature when it was sold to us. And it seems to have its own unique version of .NET that is incompatible with anything newer than .NET 2.1 Core. For whatever reason, this technology has essentially been deprecated as all future efforts will be pushed towards the next technology on the list, WinUI. So although we'll be using this to build our game, note that we will only be doing this so we can illustrate deploying to the Xbox. So one quick thing to note immediately when you're going through the process here is that with the other technologies that we used, we were able to create things as needed, and then after we created it, only when we went over to actually try to deploy it using the app package system did it give us this option. With UWP, because it's native to this approach and technology, this option is the first thing you choose from. So you pick the target version of the operating system and the underlying SDK before you even do anything else. So we also have drag and drop here. And it should look pretty similar to your WPF application because at the end of the day, the UI is being described using XAML. Unfortunately, this is where the problems come in because it's ultimately not the same XAML as what you have in WPF. And you can start to see that as you look at the way that local namespaces are imported into the XAML scope. UWP uses a using and then it's specified there, and WPF uses a CLR namespace and then it's specified there. Now there are a myriad of weird minor differences between one and the other that make it almost a nightmare to try to transition one from the other because you literally have to go through and change little things here and there. It's not like this major change, which would almost be better to a certain extent because you could just, okay, I gotta scrap it and start working, right? But this is like these tiny little differences all over the place that you've gotta all find and change. Initially there was no tool for doing this, so it was quite laborious. So you can also double click into this. And then what we obviously have to do now is add a reference to our reference library. And here's the second problem with UWP. You cannot reference your typical .NET Framework, anything libraries. Everything UWP has to be UWP. So for us to use that library, we would have to create our own UWP class library that we can then use for UWP related things. Because of this, the concept of shared libraries was created with Visual Studio. And the way shared libraries work is that they bind themselves to a project at build time so that it's like they're part of that project as opposed to being a separate deployable unit. So now that we have our reference shared project, what we'll do is we'll actually copy class 1 in there, and then we'll add a reference to it. And essentially we can delete this one. So if I now build this, it's like it's a part of it, and I can go to my WinForms project and I can see that reference library, everything is all working the same because this share has now been added into this library and made a part of this library while you're building it. This now allows us to go and create a UWP class library. Right? So they have their own unique class library. Which also follows this format. Then I can delete that. And then this particular library, I can then add a reference to our shared project as well. And then that should build. And here you have the second problem with UWP. So the language version of UWP is different than the language version of normal C#.NET projects. And as C# continues to be incremented and made better, and new capabilities keep getting added to it, basically if you're using UWP, you're lost. You're scoped down to C# version 7.3, and right now we're at C# 12. So I'm going to have to go back to this class, and whereas I was using this file scoped namespace capability, I'm going to have to change it back to a block. Now this should work. Now I can add a reference to the UWP reference lib. And then in here, use the same code I've been using all this while. And it still uses button content. And we set this as a startup project and get some errors. Have it. it's all working. So you can see the roundabout way that we've had to take to be able to leverage our pre-existing code. We can't directly add it to our project. We've got to go a roundabout way by using this notion of shared projects, which are a great tool and a great utility. But again, as you can imagine, the problem here is it locks you from a development perspective to only being able to use features and capabilities that are tied to the 7.3 version of .NET, right? So right here, this reference library is a .NET 8 library, and this guy has no mention of the version of .NET that it is. But we know that it essentially only works with C# 7.3. And it could only work with its own kind of .NET. So what about deploying? Well, remember those other projects where we had to add a specific packaging project in order to deploy? With UWP, that's not needed. We automatically, by default, are set up within a framework of using some version of the OS and using that overall packaging technology. So to package and deploy, all we really have to do is publish the application. Publishing the application will once again follow the same format that we use when using the Windows App Packaging tool. And when it comes to actually running it on your Xbox, when you go and you select remote, it actually pops up and gives you the option to enter the IP address of the remote machine, whatever that machine might be. It doesn't do the same thing that the others have done, which is that you don't get this pop-up until you actually try to run it. So what I've done here is I've just gone back and just cleaned this up a bit and centralized the button. I've basically set the horizontal alignment to center, vertical alignment to center. Nothing else has been changed. And let's run this and see how it functions on the Xbox. And as you can see, the application has actually started, meaning that it's been activated, unlike the other applications. And with my mouse from my controller moving, which I have over here, as you can see, that's moving around. And then if I click this, you can see that the same code is actually working on the Xbox. UWP does support the ability to run native applications from within it. Let's see how that works. To do this, you're going to actually need an app package project as well, since that's typically the way to safely run a native application. And we'll use a WPF application just so we can do something more modern. So set this as the entry point. It's going to start with UWP. It is a UWP application. It's just that we're going to be running from the UWP application, a native app, which is the WinForms application. Next, we're going to have to make some changes to the package manifest of this app. Now I just close some things down, keep it simple. Next, we need to update the package manifest for this package to allow for running full trust applications. First, we're going to add a restricted launch. If you double click on the package manifest, it opens this view, and you just need to add a declaration to allow for restricted launch. And then we can view the code for this. We first add a namespace for desktop applications because one does not exist. And then we add an extension for a full trust application. The name that we use here is a combination of the folder and the actual name of the application. So it'll be WPF sample and then WPF sample.exe. And notice that when you actually add that reference to the native application, everything associated with it gets added. So here's the reference library, and here's the actual WinForm sample with its own version of the reference library. Let's run this locally and see what happens. And that works. And then let's try to actually publish that and see if publishing it right now works with this attached to it. Notice that the story has somewhat changed now. 10.0.0.74, I believe. Looks like it's running. So we're making progress. Now we can go back here. And what we want to do is we now want to make it so that we can use this as a full trust application. Okay, that continues to work. And now we'll make some changes here. Just add another button. So we'll do the same thing we did before. Okay. So running a desktop application requires you to now add the desktop capabilities to UWP that by default don't exist. So this is where there's likely going to be an issue with publishing it, because UWP applications in their native forms are really not typical desktop applications. They don't leverage Win32 or any of those things, and those things are not available on the Xbox. So we add a reference to Universal Windows, and we add extensions, and we are looking for the desktop version. And I'll take the most recent one. Now that I add this, I will be able to use the full trust. And I'm just going to do that and then do that. And this is an awaitable thing. So we want to and set this to async. Oh, it's already synced. Right, so what this is going to do now is it's essentially going to start that WPF application and run that WPF application. Ooh. And there you have it. So that's opened up the WPF application, and when I click hello, it opens up the WinForms application. I can click count here, I can click count here, but notice that this count is completely separate. Right, see, these two are the same, and this count is separate, right? Because it's not sharing the same library, and they're really not in the same memory space. They're really two applications, one being started by another. So how does this look when we deploy to the Xbox now that we have it working locally? Let's find out. There you have it. We've got count and we've got open native. If I go here and I click my count button, it's adding as normal. If I go over here and I click open native, I get an error because it's basically not able to start it. And this is likely the same reason why when you try to activate that application, it basically tells you that it's not able to activate. So sadly, as stated, desktop-based applications simply don't run on the Xbox because the desktop libraries are just not available on the Xbox to use. That means you're not going to be able to use WinForms or WPF or any technology that relies specifically on desktop related technologies on your Xbox. UWP likely works on the Xbox because it's been designed to use DirectX or the low-level drawing technologies that Microsoft offers that are on the Xbox. So it's able to leverage those and use those to basically present the same kind of user interface. Stay tuned to this channel for future updates. We'll be giving away you heard it, two Surface laptops when we hit 50,000 subscribers. So please like, share, subscribe to help us get to that point. Happy coding and have a blessed day.